We are live. It's a Friday, which means it's a repeat guest. We've got Justin. We're going to talk about a great course he's got for people, I believe, in the back of the house, as well as something that hit me smack dab in the face that I recently saw mentioned in some of his content. We'll be back in a second. Justin, my man, tell everybody who you are, where you hail from, and what you do.
It's great to be with you, Matt. My name is Justin Khanna. I am a chef with training in Michelin kitchens for 8+ years. In 2017, I moved to Seattle from a stint kind of running a restaurant as an executive sous chef in Europe and Scandinavia. Then I kind of launched a industry podcast, a YouTube channel where I did gear reviews and tips and tricks and all the things that I wish someone would have taught me when I was in culinary school. And that's since grown into an education-based company that's kind of digital first in creating products for who I call hospitality creators. And we can dig into that in a little bit if you kind of want to.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, that's what I work on these days. Matt, I was going to share with you, it's so funny that I had a couple of people request to do dinners after coming out of the pandemic. I don't know if you've had clients or even yourself experiencing this too. People just kind of want to get back at it, which is really, really interesting. And the funny thing that I've been noticing that, again, I'm happy to dig into in this conversation is the funny supply demand thing that's happening, at least where I am in Seattle, where a bunch of people now want to get back to doing parties and dinners and private events. But a lot of people have left doing that. So there's this fascinating supply demand thing that's happening right now. And I don't know if you're positioned to take advantage of it. I think there's no better time to kind of grow in this kind of environment after such a turbulent last 24 months for everybody.
Well, I love it. Well, let's talk about real quick also the Repertoire Podcast, because that's the podcast name these days. Talk about what you talk about on there and who the ideal listener would be.
Yeah, so it was originally previously it was called the Emulsion Podcast. And last time you were so nice to have me on, that's what I was pitching. And it was a name that I just kind of pulled out because I was speaking to who I was 2, 3, 5 years before starting that podcast, which was the hungry, ambitious, fine dining focused, read about food science and watched nerdy YouTube videos on their days off type of person. And so the Emulsion was a perfect brand name for that type of show. But as I started to think about broadening that a little bit to having more hospitality creators in mind, not just chefs, if I wanted to speak to a bartender and I was talking to them about the Emulsion, or if I wanted to teach a front of house course, and hiring someone to teach that, and it was under this brand name, the Emulsion, I was like, well, I don't necessarily know if that's the best idea. So the whole brand changed and came under this Repertoire umbrella. And that's what the podcast is for. And I'm striving to be the place for hospitality creators to not only get thoughtful insights on news, but also similar to what we're doing now, conversations with high performers, people who have built businesses, people who have kind of bucked the status quo and done something different, whether it's adding digital media to their stuff, doing e-commerce, going direct to consumer, opening multiple locations or riding trends like cloud kitchens. I think it's just really interesting to get other people's experience and share that with the next generation so they can ultimately, pass the torch and continue to be more successful than we are.
I love it. So I'm going to read a quote that I saw on, I think it was LinkedIn or your podcast or somewhere, because it ironically stuck out to me. And I'll tell you the story because I just got back from Miami and a guy talked about it. So you said on there that one of your goals is to, I'm going to read this so I don't butcher it, get to the heart of what makes people excel. And he hopes to ask questions that no one else asks. Well, this past week, I'll put it this way. I'll frame it this way. So our company's grown a lot. What was just my goal when I started this company in 2008 was I was going to be a sole proprietor to no employees, because I had employees in the past, 40 of them at the boat dealership. This is going to be the Matt Plapp show. So I had no pressure to help somebody else live, and I could just be myself. Well, that grew from 1 to 2 to 5 to 10 to 20. And we're in like the 47 area now. So this past 12 months, though, is we've built a sales team. And, every business, whether you're a restaurant or a nonprofit, you've got to have marketing and sales. And for the longest time, I ignored what I knew I had to get to, which was sales, because I knew I would be leading a bunch of mats, and leading a bunch of mats is kind of difficult. And so the last 6 months to a year, I've struggled with learning how to motivate. And I figured out a couple of my problems recently. And one of them was I was trying to lead everybody the same instead of understanding each person's hopes, desires, and analyzing their skill set. Well, this past week, I was in Miami, Florida, speaking at a conference myself. And the guy who spoke after me, a guy named Jeff Ruby. And if you're from the Cincinnati region, it's not the chef or the restaurateur Jeff Ruby, it's the business consultant Jeff Ruby, a lot less hair, spoke about leadership. And yeah, Jeff Ruby here in Cincinnati has like Donald Trump hair. This guy has a shaved head. So it's kind of ironic when you saw the two. So he's speaking about leadership and he told a story. And I'll probably butcher the story, but in essence, he said he showed up. He was a coach for a baseball team. I was a freshman in high school. And first day of practice, kid shows up that he knew had not played baseball before, but he was going to join the team and learn. And he shows up and he's got his glove. He's like, well, coach, I'm kind of confused. He goes, what do you mean? What's going on? He's like, well, I'm right-handed, but this glove goes on the left hand. Like, I don't get it. And he said, man, I realized at that point we had a problem. He said, so here I am analyzing. I'm about ready to have like a 3-hour practice. And I've got this kid that literally has never physically participated in tossing or catching of a baseball. He said, so I had two choices. Go on with practice, let him stumble through and have probably a shit show in his world. Or I could let other people run the practice. And I spend 3 hours with this kid. And he said, I did that. I literally underhand tossing, little 2-foot catches, kid catch. Yeah, good job. And he said, long story short, into the season, the kid's a starting shortstop and batting 300. And he said, the moral of the story is you can't leave people behind. You got to make time to teach and lead people. And like, for me, it hit home, like literally, like it was like he was looking at me because on my sales staff, I've got a guy on my team, Doug, that's got 27 years of sales experience. I've got Randy on my team who's got 6 months of sales experience and he's in his 40s. So for 20 years before, he was literally doing the exact opposite of sales. And here I am trying to motivate and lead both of them the same way. And it's not going to work. And this guy, the comment he made at the end of the day, he said, one thing I want y'all to write down is you've got to make time in your schedule to lead your people individually. And so when I saw that quote, it really resonated with me. So talk about like why you wrote that, why that's a vision of yours and where that comes from in the hospitality world.
I think the listeners might be able to empathize with hearing a keynote fireside chat, someone on stage after they've sold their restaurant empire, or they've just opened their 15th location, or they just happened to be able to scale to a multi-franchise unit, or they just got their Michelin star or what have you. And they're getting asked by the moderator or whoever is talking to them, the journalist in the Eater article, and they ask them, what do you think made you successful? Why did this work? Why did they whatever? And it's so frustrating to get the most generic answer, which is, oh, I just put my head down and worked.
Yeah,
or, oh,
I
just grinded. Or, growing up for me, because my goal was, I wanted to have a 3 Michelin star restaurant in Chicago. And so I would listen to Grant Achatz on interviews. I would listen to Thomas Keller give his kind of like PBS show. I would watch videos of Eric Repair doing fine dining demos on whatever channel it was. And I was always so frustrated that the person who was asking the questions just left it at this surface level spot. And they were just, for some reason, satisfied with asking the generic question that this person has been asked a million times. And you probably know this, Matt. If you've been asked a question that a gajillion people have asked you, it's not that you're not trying to be creative, but your brain almost goes to giving the default answer.
Yep.
And I think that that's just human nature. Like we just, we'll default to something if we've done it before, and that's us as humans. But I always told myself that if and when I ever had the opportunity to be up on stage asking someone with any resemblance of success a question like that, I would try to go deeper. I would try to ask the things that, again, people might have not thought to ask. Or in my entrepreneurial journey, I got stuck here. And then I would probably want to ask that person, did you ever deal with this? Yep. Is this ever something that you ever grappled with? Because, and Tim Ferriss is really good at asking this, where he asks people to name what a favorite failure of theirs is. Because similar to your baseball example, I think a lot of people look at high performers or entrepreneurs who have built something substantial or whatever, and they think that every single time they step up to the plate, they hit a home run.
Yeah.
And in reality, that's not true.
Yeah.
And so almost there's like an underlying point to that question, that to any that mindset that I bring into interviews when I have guests on my show, which is, how can I showcase the fact that this person is not perfect? This is the person who has also struggled to get where they're at. This is the person who tried things and failed. This is the person who thought the business was going to go in this direction, and they were given data from the market or got feedback from customers or got given a piece of advice from a mentor, and they were like, no, we need to pivot this into a different direction. And there's wisdom there, because of this idea that, you have to start completely from scratch if you're going to try to do something new or build something for yourself, or try to construct a combination of two things, not necessarily fusion style, but you're going to, I'm thinking about a place in a place in London that's a combination of, it's called Bubble Dogs in the front, and it's called Kitchen Table in the back, and it's a hot dog and champagne bar in the front. So they literally do hot dogs and champagne and great cocktails. And then in the back is like a 12-seat tasting menu spot. And it's like, if you want to do something like that, it's like, you can kind of take the best from both worlds in this world that we live in, where everybody's kind of incentivized to put their best ideas out there for free.
Yeah.
So that's more or less where that comes from. I could go a couple more different routes in that, but I hope that at least gives you some context.
For sure. Now, the other side of it, which you mentioned, is what you're doing now is you're helping chefs and others, I guess I'll put it in terms of tell their story and showcase it. And I had a podcast. I've got a new podcast. I've got 4 now. I've got one that's daily. That's every morning.
Wow.
And I got to record 5 episodes this weekend. And I made one that aired this past Monday. And I talked about my experience in media, how 1999, if you were going to try and like analyze where you were going to buy marketing for your restaurant, because back then that's all you could do was buy marketing. There was nothing free. It was buying it outside of a kid on a corner with a sign. There was like 40 options. You got 10 radio stations, handful of TV, you got cable, billboards, sports, whatever. And I said, today, you've got this device that every single person you could ever want to feed, entertain, influence, there are either 4 places on this phone: online, social, email, or text. Maybe they're on a game, which could still be reached with online ads. But from the standpoint of like the context of social, is that most restaurants' ticket times have been slowed down by people like me on my damn phone that are ordering. The drive-through line is slowed down because somebody's on Twitter versus driving forward. The stoplight's slowed down because we're on our phone. And yet a lot of people aren't taking, like in this camera, I'm just using my laptop now, but we got these real fancy Canon cameras all over here. My team's not here to help me, and I'm not smart enough to use those. But it's as simple as a chef having a tripod and saying, hey, I got a story to tell you, and I'm going to tell it through food. So is that something you're helping with? Did I capture that right?
That will be the focus in the future. I think a lot of people, it's so funny you brought this up, because I'm certainly running into this face first myself, because I came from the research the cinematic YouTubers, come up with what all the editing techniques are. Yep. I produced, shot, scripted, everything, did the color correcting, the transitions, the titles on all my videos up until probably I want to say 15 months ago, when I finally first started working with an editor. And so I come from that world of capture the footage, make sure the frame rate's right, make sure that the color correction is correct and the skin tones don't look off, correct the white balance in Final Cut Pro. And you put a video up on TikTok or on Instagram Reels, and then the next day you take your phone and you do this move, and you just film yourself talking to the camera. And this one, the one with the phone, the handheld one, no editing, no anything, gets 5 times the views.
Yep.
And so I'm running straight into that. And I think it's one of those funny things where, Matt, I'm so principles focused in the way that I teach, when I teach cooking classes online to home cooks, when I do my course, Total Station Domination for professional chefs, when I come up with another course idea on how to do something like talk about food that's in the works right now that I'm working on. I'm so principles focused, and I actually, I really dislike getting into the tactics, because they change from day to day to day. And especially to your point, like you mentioned, the online world that we live in, when it's so hyper competitive and iterations happen 10 times faster than they did in the 90s and early 2000s, we're kind of at this funny place where, sure, I could come up with a course for hospitality people on how to create content online, but I would want to do it in a way where I talk about a lot of the pillars that you share with folks, right? Being thoughtful in your marketing, making sure you're collecting information, making sure that you're coming up with a brand story that truly comes through in the content that you're sharing. And so those are the principles that I would put into a course like that versus the idea of, oh, well, you have to be on XYZ platform, you have to do XYZ number of seconds, you have to have
Yeah.
XYZ call to action at the end. Because if we're being honest, and me and my production assistant talk about this all the time, like, we need to have a full scale audit of how we take a look at producing content every quarter.
Yeah.
It's not something where we can come up with a system or an SOP and just be like, yep, this is what we roll with. This is the template. This is what we just kind of replicate over and over again. Because I notice it in my analytics. I don't know if you notice the same in yours, where it's like, templatize what you can templatize, but there's something else where just like the audience notices when you put in the extra effort to put quality standards on certain things, whether that's a little bit of extra B-roll in the knife gear review. Like I see it in the comments. People say it. They're like, I loved the way that you showcased this knife. Right? I love the fact that like this is the only video I watched where I could see the knife from different angles or anything like that.
I
And so-
recall the video you did recently about how you don't wear a glove on your knife hand.
Totally.
Yeah,
Like
so, I mean,
little
you're
stuff.
right. Now,
Yeah.
I'll say this. The one thing I will kind of disagree on there
Yeah.
is that one of the reasons that restaurants and chefs aren't creating content is they don't have the expertise you just talked about. And like, for example, your video guys would probably cringe at the fact, like, I'm in a full-fledged studio with 15 grand and cameras sitting in front of me. I'm using my Apple laptop because I didn't know what wire to hit and button. I'm like, whatever, I'll just do this. And, you know, the lights, I know like this one's a little yellower than that one. I probably didn't turn something on right. I'm just more of like an action taker. Yes, I do have certain content because I have 5 video people that will sit down and do these videos that are produced, that are lit perfectly, that they do all the fancy shit on. But for like a chef, I know a lot of when you're talking about the Michelin star ones, but even when you look at any chef, because you have a lot who will follow you. I've seen the comments, I follow you as well, that they just need to take quicker action. Like I was in Miami, Florida this past week. I spoke to a couple hundred people at a marketing conference. And there's all these people I'm giving this idea of. And oddly enough, the idea was wrapped around these type of interviews, how I get experts on here and have conversations and introduce them to my audience, get introduced to their audience and build relationships. And so many of them have every excuse why they haven't done it. And like at the end of the day, pick up your phone, pick up a camera, pick up your tripod, get in front of a nice window in front of your restaurant that has natural light and tell a story. But I know that like, I've talked to friends of mine who are, you know, what I would consider higher quality chefs. A friend of mine calls it tweezer food restaurants. That when the plate comes out, it's a work of art. It's not like a pulled pork sandwich with some fries slapped on it. And so they struggle with how do I get to that level? And a lot of times, like you mentioned earlier, that TikTok, that Instagram reel that pops off for 30,000 views is the one that had the worst lighting, no editing, was live, versus the one that you spent 4 hours making perfect.
So many threads to pull on there. So the first one that comes to mind is this idea that it's almost the billboard mentality with content online, is that a lot of chef owners and especially people who are maybe a little bit more operationally minded, who haven't quite yet been sold on the idea of creating content for something like social or even doing email content. It's this idea that, okay, well, how can I prove that this is a good use of my time? Because a lot of people, especially the ones that are operators, empathize with this. You have 15 other things that you could be doing, but it doesn't actually seem like that hard of work because it's not.
Yeah.
It's designed to not be hard. You are doing leveraged work. There's a guy who I just saw speak at a conference in Boise. His name is He, and he runs a blog called Rad Reads, and he has this concept called $10,000 work.
Okay.
And so he talks about this idea of a lot of us kind of get caught doing the $100 an hour work because it releases dopamine. It feels good. Like the idea that you can kind of go and check the temperatures of the fridge because it's like, I want to make sure that when the health department comes, like all our temperature logs are up to date. Or the idea that, oh, well, I'm going to organize all of our invoices from our purveyors right now. And that's exactly what I need to be doing right now. Versus this idea that where I'm going to do this very leveraged thing where I have to make something once And to your point, it can be shared with 30,000 people. Are you going to see the direct uptick in sales in your POS system from making that? Maybe, maybe not. It might be something where, Matt and I watch it and we all of a sudden say, hey, we're going to actually be in Raleigh next month. And I saw this TikTok from this chef. You and I are both going to the same conference. Maybe we should go eat there instead of going to eat at this other place. And that's the billboard analogy where it's like, you're driving by a billboard. How do you track the ROI of a billboard? Usually a billboard is kind of put in conjunction with other marketing things, direct mail, you're doing social stuff, you're doing stuff on email. It's a multi-pronged thing. But the idea that you wouldn't create content because it doesn't feel like a good use of your time, I think is a little bit silly. Now, there's also another fascinating concept, which we see in the industry all too much, which is people are running at 110% already. So you're asking them to kind of like put a couple more straws on your back. And it's kind of like, what's going to be the one that breaks it? And so I think a lot of people go ahead.
I'll say, but what I see, tell me if you see this, they're running at 110% because they're doing shit they should be doing. Like Matt Black, for example. I've got a team. We are busy. We grew in June by 147.6%. And that stressed a lot of us. But guess what? I didn't clean the gutters when I needed clean. I had a gutter company come. I didn't do my landscape. I had a landscaping come. I don't do my own editing. My team has a team that edits. Like we have all these things. We shop out so much. Like I jokingly the other day told one of my guys that helps find subcontractors for certain aspects, said, I almost need somebody to help date my wife. Like that sounds weird. I'm just joking. But would you agree that 110% is that they're doing not $100 job dollar an hour, they're doing $10 an hour jobs way too often.
100%. And that's the place where you will feel that overwhelm, that stress, that I don't know if this is worth it. I'm not necessarily excited to show up on camera. I think it's kind of silly that I have to do social media stuff. You'll feel that if you don't give up some of that 110%. And that might be taking a look at your sous chef and saying, do I need to be the one that's organizing invoices? Or is this sous chef actually someone who's interested in owning their own place someday? And this would be a really valuable skill for them to possess in knowing how to go through the finances and actually have a better grip on our food costs because I have delegated doing invoices to them. That's an interesting conversation. Is the kind of like going out and talking to guests something that I need to be doing? Or can I kind of have a couple of my front of house people step up a little bit and then have those conversations versus me being, and again, like there's different, every business is different. Every operator is different, but it's people saying, oh, well, that's going to take me from 110 to 118% if I have to do the sit in front of the window and do the IG phone thing. And so that's one. The other one is, okay, well, I want to stay at where my 110% is, Justin. I'm completely happy with where I'm at. You take that 8% and you find someone, to Matt's point, who is experienced in creating content online, who is experienced in what the trends are, who does know exactly what the lighting specifics are and where to put the titles and how to find the sounds and where to promote it and what hashtags to use. And you look at that person and you say, let's do an experiment. Let's work together for 3 months. I'm going to say, I have decided that I'm going to commit to whatever budget that I want to put into this as an experiment. And that's something that you reinvest in with your business. And then that turns into something where you can take it at the end, you can analyze it, because again, you don't necessarily know you mentioned those 4 different platforms. If you decide that you're going to start with social and then maybe add email and then you add texting later, maybe that's something where you decide, oh my goodness, our conversion on text message, when we send out a blast that we're doing a cool special this weekend, or our bar manager just released a new cocktail, our guest count goes through the roof when we do something like that. And that's something that you can actually work with at the end of something like a 3 to 6 month experiment, versus this idea that people think, oh, well, if I start doing social content, I'm going to end up having to commit to it forever. And it's like, yes, kind of. But at the same time, it's like, how cool would it be if you could just, almost throw it out of the nest and see if it flies? Maybe that's a poor analogy.
Well, and it's,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. A couple things there I'll bring up. That one thing I always encourage people to do, I know you mentioned the 3 month. I tell people, you know what? You didn't buy that $80,000 sign and go, you know what? If 3 months people like it, I'm gonna do it. So like me, I'm year 5 right now on my content. I hired David Schlatter, my first full-time video guy, who's now my direct marketing director, 3 years ago. Like I committed a chunk of change to have a dude fly with me, stay in a hotel. I had to feed him. He'd film, he'd edit it. And I had people going, my gosh, it was $100,000 investment that year. And I knew. And my coach said, Matt, it won't pay off for 2 or 3 years. Now I have 5 Davids, basically. I have studios, we have cameras. And I can honestly say I still couldn't look at it and put an ROI on it because I know that at the end of the day, if I want my company to get where I want it to go, I have to be, everybody has to know me. I've got a sign out here in our hallway. We just did a podcast of my behind the scenes that released the other day where it talks about how, the title I think one of my employees made was how Matt got his Lamborghini, a little clickbait. And I was told by another person like, hey, by the way, your guy put the wrong model on there. And I was like, okay, cool. You saw it. But it talks about the story behind the I Know Matt Plapp sign that's framed out here. And that's the concept, is that you need to be known. And a lot of it's not going to happen in 3-6 months. But if we all in 2022 can agree that this device is not going anywhere, and the easiest place to reach my 20-year-old daughter, my 18-year-old son, my 76-year-old dad, and my 45-year-old wife, is it 45? Yeah, she's 46 next month, 45, is a phone, then you're going to lose. The other aspect of it, and this is a cool way to really analyze, like when you mentioned you're at 110, I had a coach do this to me a couple years ago. There we go. A couple years ago, he said, Matt, I want you to do this. I want you to chart your week. And this is kind of sounds extreme, but he did. Every 15 minutes, write down what you're doing. And then I want you to
effective executive. Peter, I think it's Peter Drucker. He does that.
Does that do that?
Yeah, he asks people to do that.
And so as Dave says, this is good stuff. We got more good stuff coming.
Thanks,
but
Dave.
He said, chart it for 2 weeks, 15 minutes. At the end of the 2 weeks, I want you to analyze what you should be, what the only thing on that list that you could possibly do. Nobody else. Go to the bathroom, date your wife, get on video and do a podcast. And then I want you to analyze the things that you can delegate. I want you to analyze the crap that you shouldn't be doing. So like last week, for example, I ran pretty hard a couple weeks in a row. I always run hard, but I mean, abnormally hard. I had this one day with like 4 hours, no meetings. And I'm like, hey, we got to move the ping pong table out here. We got to do this. So I literally spent like 4 hours just moving random shit around the office. It felt great because I had nothing. I just was unscrewing bolts and moving ping pong tables and the Red Bull machine into our office. And it felt good. But you look at your weeks, and I guarantee you, every single CEO, owner, chef, everybody can find probably 30% of what they are doing on a weekly basis isn't them. And then the other aspect to stack on top of that is the fact that there's people on their team that if they gave that responsibility to, would elevate them.
Totally.
And allow them to do a little more and be a little more involved and feel like they're part of this bigger process versus something else. And then that puts that room for that person to really run and succeed.
The funniest part that I see with folks, and I please comment, please tweet at one of us if this was the episode that convinced you to actually start creating or to hire someone or to delegate it out or actually, post that first video, because that would be really cool.
Yeah.
I don't always believe that these conversations are the ones that do it, but one anecdote that I think is always funny and a bit paradoxical is this idea that people who don't create content are still a little bit unsold, or they're a little bit hesitant, or they kind of cringe at the idea of putting out something online. Is this funny paradox that is both, if I put it out there, everybody's going to see it, and it's going to be horrendously embarrassing that this is my first piece of content and I don't know what I'm doing. And then also, why would I put something out there? I don't have any followers, and no one's going to see it. And so it's this funny thing. Well, it's like, okay, wait, are people going to see it or are they not going to see it?
Yeah.
Because either way, it's kind of like, okay, you talk yourself in a circle a little bit there.
Were you listening to my sales meeting this morning?
Yeah,
literally. I brought that up. I talked about 2017. I hated doing video. And if anybody knows me now, or if you follow me, you would be surprised because I'm on video. I think we have an average day of 75 to 80 posts across my social platforms, and it's almost all video. And I do a lot of it. But I remember Hoffer House, Pittsburgh, 2017. It was the early summer. I'm out in the beer garden. I'm trying to convince myself to do this video that the message made sense. And I was like, oh, and so I went over like, there are people here. I didn't want humans around me because it's embarrassing, right? I don't know why it's embarrassing. And like, I knew it, like nobody was actually going to watch, maybe except my mom. And so I'm like over here doing this, like, what's up? It's Matt. And I'm like recording, not going live, which number one is the rule I do now. And if you're early on, go live. That way you can't not post it and you critique yourself. But I'm like, hey, what's up? And then the landscape guy's mowing the grass. I'm like, damn it. Like, does this guy follow me? So I go to, I'm like, okay, I got to find a corner where there's no humans and not the landscape guy. It eventually got to a point where the only place I could do the video was where people were going to have to see me talking about something on a camera. And it was so trivial. And you're right. My first live video I ever did had no viewers. And my first 100 videos I did in my world sucked. But it added up. And we had this about a month ago. We went to a restaurant called La Villa up in Chicago. And my brand, our other media company, America's Best Restaurants, the Road Show, they shot an episode there. It actually aired this past Tuesday on that Facebook page of that restaurant. It's up to 28,000 views organically in 3 days. But about 6 weeks ago is when we filmed, and we always do a live video. Luis was the host. He gets his phone. He takes over the restaurant's page. And the owners, 9 out of 10 of them have never done a video on Facebook Live. And he's like, Christina, we're going live. We're telling your story. And she's like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. He's like, we're doing it. What's up? It's Luis. We're at La Villa. We're with Christina. Christina, tell us about the restaurant. They went on for like 10 minutes. The marketing guy, Claudio, told me, he said, Matt, the next 2 weeks, every single day, people were raving about Christina's video, asking when the episode was going to air. It was the talk of the restaurant. And that's why the episode debuted this past week. And the comical part is like that episode airing on their channel, Facebook charged $0. That live video that Luis did with Christina, who she thought would suck, did cost $0, and everybody raved about it.
Couple more threads to pull on there. The paradox that I mentioned earlier kind of follows this mental model, which is you either win or you learn. And so to Adadai's point here in the comments, it's this idea that, okay, you post your piece of content and it pops off. 50,000 views. You've got 200 followers, 100 followers, 300 followers. You had no business getting that many views, but for whatever reason, it just went and it did it. Cool. Now you have a bunch of people that the algorithm now knows is interested in your content. So now you've got something that's kind of teed up for the way that these platforms are built. For the next piece of content you put out there, you can kind of forecast that it might not get 50,000 views, but it's going to get more views than however many followers you have, especially if you're working with something like TikTok at the time of recording this video, disclaimer there. Or to our point, and I have podcast episodes on my channel that are exactly the same, Matt. My mom is the only one who either watched that or commented on that or whatever. And nobody viewed it. But then it's this conversation of like, awesome. I got the reps in. I got on camera. I understood how many times I say and have placeholder words and stumble over my thoughts and can't quite get things right. And all of that stuff gets hashed out and comes out in the wash in experiences like that. So you're just more prepared now for the next piece of content that you end up putting out there. And the second point that I was going to just kind of mention in the and I totally lost my train of thought. It's quite all right. Let's keep going. It'll come back to me. It'll come back.
No, you're spot on. I didn't know we were this much in common. I knew I liked you a lot. I knew you had great stuff, but you're right. I talked to my team. I was doing training the other day with people that I want to get more on camera. And I said, the first thing I want you to do every time you do an episode and do an interview is right at the top of the page. When you go to say those filler words, breathe. I said, because one, it erodes confidence when people hear it, and they might not pay attention, but their brain does. I said, but it also takes away from kind of your messaging. But it's key in practicing that I can't get to a spot where I'm good if I don't accomplish the times that I suck. And I can tell you, I can go right now. I did a video 2 months ago, was training my team. And I said, hey, I got the first chapter of my next book I want to record. And when I write books, I don't script it. I have literally the title of the chapter. So I had this title and I hadn't done and I do it all on video. Then we transcribe it. I said, okay, guys, here we go. I put my laptop. I had them on Zoom. I'm going to go in the studio. We're going to hit record. And I got the camera here and I went, boom. I went for 12 minutes. And I didn't even mean to do this. This wasn't the reason for the exercise, but I did 12 minutes and I came out and said, okay, 12 minutes. I had one sentence was the topic of that 12-minute conversation. What stuck out the most? And the one guy said, You never said like, or but also the level of confidence in the content. And what was funny was we took that piece of that video and my editor, David, or not editor, marketing director, popped it into the software he's got that helps you take words out. And we put it in there, and there literally was not one or like. If you would have listened to that 5 years ago, I would have been a shit show. I'm like, like, I would probably have the same sentence. But also, the big element is you just got to get out of your own way. Because a lot of us were our harshest critics. I had a post I made, I think 4 or 5 days ago, where I got on a TikTok. I hadn't been on it in a night, and I look and I got 60 notifications. I'm like, oh shit, something popped off. And I look and there wasn't anything popped off. My dad liked 60 videos. so I recorded a screen share of it and I scrolled and you see Dwayne Platt. And I shared it on social and said, that moment you log in to TT, and my dad texted me, hey, what's TT? I'm like, TikTok. And I said, the moment you log in to TT, thinking something popped off, and it's just your dad liking every video in the past couple weeks.
I think we might have talked about this in our last conversation too, but it's also this idea that, okay, we have these platforms that maybe come and go. These formats maybe come and go. Everybody's probably familiar with the big Instagram change that everybody's up in arms about, where it's a video platform now and not a photo platform. And for the person who just finally got their camera set up, and they finally got the light, and they finally got the tripod, and they finally got the section of the restaurant with the nice table backsplash that shows off their dishes in a nice way, and they're like, cool, I'm finally set up to do photos, and now Instagram has changed, and now where in the world do I put my images? Yeah. Of course, to Matt and I's point, text, email, photos make that such a richer experience to be able to integrate photos there. So this idea that photo's dead, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. However, the idea that you wouldn't pursue a platform or a style of content or a way of sharing stories because it's not worth it for that platform is just crazy. The fact that I can take all this knowledge that I have from YouTube and just kind of poured it over to a platform like TikTok. I did a whole reacts video to this big show that's been making the rounds.
Series on I saw that. I was watching it. I haven't seen the episodes, but I love your breakdown. Like, you're breaking down how this isn't in New York, it's in Chicago. I work there. There's me.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. And that got 1.5 million views on TikTok. I split the 45-minute video into 10 clips. I posted 6 of the clips. I haven't even posted all of them yet. And across the 6 clips, it's 1.5 million views. And so it's like, I can. And again, I had 300 followers when I did that. I don't have a ton of followers. I have something like 4,000 followers now on TikTok because it's been a great boost. But the reason that I could do that is because I put all the legwork in from 2016 to 2018, agonizing over how in the world do I put a video mask over a piece of content so that I can make sure that my cutout looks like this. And I probably use the same software that your editor uses to put subtitles on my stuff and just be able to screen record and make sure that the frame rate's right. And all of those little learnings compound onto themselves. And so this idea that, I don't know if you experience this, Matt, but I think people also compare themselves content quality wise a little bit sooner than they should, from the sense of, you don't want the first 5 videos of your feed to be cringeworthy, quote unquote, because and it's not even that you think the content is bad. If you thought the content was bad, you probably wouldn't be making it. You're hesitant to post it because you're comparing it to the Your Food Lab people, or the Food Story Limited people, or Food 52's food quality. And that's, of course, a trap. To listen to Matt talk about how big his team is. If you're one single solo operator, how in the world are you going to be able to compete? Quality, quantity, all of that. Everybody has to kind of start somewhere. And then the goal is, again, you either win or you learn. And then you can just kind of keep moving.
And a great example to wrap this up is one of my interns / part-time employees, Gabe. Gabe went with me to Miami because he was part of what I was speaking on. I'm like, well, he's helped with the back end. He's going. Gabe is going to be a senior in college. He has a marketing company that's doing about $8,000 a month in revenue. As a senior, he's got no employees. He's the sole employee of the company. And he does everything himself. And it's funny because he got it all from me. He's the only person, as part of his job, he became an intern of mine 3 years ago. It was a unpaid internship for a summer to work 3 months. It transitioned into, hey, I'll pay you for a couple hours a week because I only need you a couple, and you got church and school and life, and you got your company you're wanting to build, and then you'll exchange it for coaching. And I said, I'll warn you, like, I get frustrated when I coach somebody and they don't follow it. And this guy has followed it to a T, and he's a one-man show. And when he sees me do something on TikTok, he looks and sees what he likes about it. He does the content. He does exactly, and he makes it happen. And his first ones, I would text him, hey, change this. Hey, do this. And guess what? Every time it changed. But he wasn't comparing himself to me. He was just saying, hey, there's the path and the opportunity's there. So to end the conversation, talk about total stage domination.
Yeah. So I
wish I had a big voice like domination.
Yeah. So I had this paradox, Matt, where I had grown this audience. I had gotten it to this place where I have a bunch of incredibly targeted folks. It's working professionals, culinary school students, line cooks, sous chefs, pop-up hosts, people who are really in it with food. And I would put out this free content, 3 tips to set up your station better, how to structure a menu start to finish, is culinary school worth it, all of this content for free. And I kind of followed that playbook of content-focused, organic audience growth, all of that stuff, which a lot of businesses, especially in the time that I built it, would have killed for, because that would have led to immense returns on selling more products, getting more clients in the door, XYZ. The problem for me is that the only way I had to monetize it at the time was one-on-one coaching, because I hadn't quite built out any sort of sophisticated backend. I didn't have a gear line. I didn't want to do t-shirts. I didn't have anything to sell these.
You don't have any merch?
I didn't have any merch. I still don't have merch. I'm working on it. I promise I'm working on it. And so I kind of had this funny place where I was like, well, and the other funny thing, and I don't have an example here. Well, maybe I do. If you have a like a paring knife, this is a kind of expensive knife, but if you have a paring knife, which I would talk about in a lot of my videos, that is a $9 paring knife and you're doing affiliate marketing, the 3% kickback that you're getting on that $9 knife isn't exactly going to pay the bills. So I came to this place where I was like, I really like teaching. I really like educating. I really like the idea of helping to make the next generation more skilled, more apt, being able and more confident to go for higher leverage opportunities in their career. And so then I started to go down the ebook route. I started to think about courses. I looked at platforms like Skillshare. And the long story short of it is that I created a cohort-based course, which in my nature is like, that's the hardest type of course to do, because you teach everything live. Everybody signs up at the same time. It's not something where you just put a bunch of videos up behind a paywall and share it with folks. But the whole idea of it was, it was going to teach, it was called the Demi Skills course at the time. And so it was, demi is the French word for half. So it was the other half of things that I didn't think I was taught in culinary school. I was not saying culinary school was a sham. I was not saying it wasn't worth it. But I was saying that when I went out into the job environment, when I really got my first job as a chef de partie at a Michelin-starred kitchen, I didn't feel like I was prepared. And so here are all the things that I wish I would have learned. How to communicate with station partners, how to take feedback from your sous chef, how to take a new menu item that just got thrown on your station and navigate it with ease, how to write a prep list, how to write your order list, how to make sure that you're moving in the kitchen in a way that's not going to kind of like, you're more ergonomic, you're getting more stuff done in the same amount of time as the person next to you who didn't quite use their hour as productively as you did. Then that started to balloon. So it started to get to this place where I was like getting more questions outside of the original curriculum that I proposed. And it was this idea of, well, I didn't go to culinary school, Justin. Can you teach me the skills that you learned in this culinary school thing? So I had this kind of choice. I was like, does Demi continue to balloon and balloon and balloon and become more than just half? Or do I kind of like pare it down and actually, this might be valuable for the audience, really dial in on the specific avatar that you're going to try to target with this product.
Yep.
And so for me, that was the person who is working a station. I think it's one of the most fundamental units of a restaurant. If you're working garde manger station, if you're working hot apps, if you're working the grill, you have a lot of responsibility on your shoulders, and it really sucks if you don't show up to work. If I was talking about being more productive with prep, maybe that's one thing. But if the prep guy doesn't show up, it's kind of like that can get sprinkled amongst everybody else. But if you're running a station, that's important. And so that's what this course teaches. So it's split up into 3 sections: dominate tasks, dominate habits, and then dominate obstacles. Because this idea that I can give you all the tools and nothing's going to go wrong is a bit of a fallacy. And so it's 3 sections, 25 different skills that I teach. And we just launch it in cohorts. So the next one is in September. And so it's exercises with me and a bunch of other students. It's an online community so that you can connect with other industry professionals and network. It's the kind of flagship product that I have for my company, Repertoire, that I hope to kind of just grow and continue to compound on and ultimately build it into something. You know, Matt, my wife's a pharmacist, and she has to do something called continuing education. So she has to get a certain number of hours in every single year in order to keep her license. And I think it's so interesting that we acknowledge that hospitality is such a fast moving and, you know, constantly changing kind of industry, but none of us really go back to school to kind of learn anything. And I think it'd be really cool if there was an option where we could, you know, do a quick wine course or take total station nomination before you change jobs. And that's the other thing that I think is cool about my educational products is that I offer lifetime access to it. So it's not something where you just kind of, and with the updates as well. So it's not just something where you pay for it once and it's just kind of like, here you go, take it, whatever. As I get more feedback and I develop the product more, you get all those benefits forever in perpetuity, which is really, really cool, because then it's something where I don't have a relationship with my culinary school anymore. I can't just go back and take that class again just to get a refresher on it. But with all of Repertoire's products, you will, which I think
is what you said is big in the entire professional world. Matt Plapp, from 23 to 38, didn't update my skills as an entrepreneur.
Yep.
I took for granted what I knew, and I didn't read. I didn't have a coach. I didn't go through online training. Back in 2016, I met a guy named Billy Jean Shaw out of California, went through one of his training programs. I'm like, wow, my dumbass has been sitting back here doing my job pretty good, but ignoring and not getting better. And now that's what I've dedicated I'm 46 now. The last, what was that? 2016, it's 2020. So 6 years, the last 6 years, it's not a coincidence that our company is about 20 times bigger than it was then. My expertise is a lot bigger, and the future I can see. Like, I was just at an event where I'm talking to friends of mine down there, and they're like, man, I see where my company's here and they can go here. It's scary that you're here and you can see where you're going here. And I'm like, well, I upgraded my knowledge, my skill set. I'm a consummate learner, and programs like you have at joinrepertoire.com are going to help people in the hospitality profession dominate their station.
Your use of the word upgrade is so key, because if there was anything else in your restaurant that you could upgrade, your oven, your hood system, your fridge consistency on the temperature, your saute pans, the burners on your stove, you'd probably upgrade them. And you look at that cost compared to the cost that a lot of operators is their highest expense, which is their labor. And you wouldn't make the investment to upgrade your team. I think there's a little bit of a, you know, fun opportunity there to make sure that everybody is kind of continuing to grow and learn and become more valuable team members. I think there's something there that's the change that I want to see in the industry. And so that's why I create what I create.
Awesome. Well, I love it. You spent some time with us today. As you saw, I'll put it back on the screen. Join repertoire.com. Check out the Repertoire Podcast. Appreciate your time as always. You dropped some major knowledge bombs. Have a great weekend.
It's awesome to be with you again, Matt. And I hope your weekend is also exciting. Thanks again, everybody.
Pull the hot tub, a grill, and some sunshine. See you, Justin.
See ya.